I remember the exact moment everything stopped making sense. Not the moment she handed back the ring, not the silence in that hallway with the white roses still in vases and the caterers setting up tables 40 feet away. Not even the moment I sat in my car for 3 hours with the engine running and nowhere to go. No, the moment everything stopped making sense was 6 months before that. I was standing in my office on the 31st floor, glass on 3 sides, city below me like a circuit board lit up at night. I had just closed the biggest deal of my career, 11 months of work, hundreds of calls, 3 countries, 2 failed attempts, and 1 final negotiation that went until 4 in the morning. And when it closed, when the number cleared and the emails started flooding in and my phone buzzed so many times I had to turn it face down, I stood at that window and waited. I waited to feel something, and there was nothing, just the hum of the air conditioning, just my own reflection in the glass, looking back at me like a stranger I'd been paying to pretend to be me. I genuinely thought, that the feeling would come, that I'd earned it, that the happiness was somewhere behind the next goal, the next threshold, the next version of the plan. I had been telling myself that for 12 years, wait, before you scroll, I need you to hear this, because I know you. I know the way you open your eyes in the morning and the first thing that floods in isn't peace. It's the list. It's the gap between where you are and where you think you need to be. I know you because I was you, only I was further down the road you're on, and I need to tell you what I found at the end of it, not to scare you, not to lecture you, but because someone should have told me, and nobody did. I built something extraordinary, by almost every measure the world has. I built a company from a laptop on a folding table in a studio apartment where the heat didn't work in January. I built a team, I built a reputation, I built a number in my bank account that I used to think, as a kid with holes in his sneakers, would mean I had finally made it. I built habits and systems and routines so optimized they could have run without me. I built a body. I built a wardrobe, I built an image, I built the version of myself I thought the world needed to see in order to take me seriously, in order to love me, in order to keep me around. I thought building was the same as living. I thought achievement was the same as worthiness. I thought if I just produced enough, performed well enough, accumulated enough proof, enough evidence of my value, then one day the verdict would come back in my favor. That some invisible court would finally look at everything I'd made and say, yes, you're enough, you can rest now. Tell me something. When was the last time you let yourself be seen? Not your results, not your highlight reel, not the curated version of you that walks into rooms and says the right things and knows how to laugh at exactly the right moment. I mean you. The version that doesn't know what to say. The version that lies awake at 3 in the morning running the same conversation on loop. The version that is genuinely, quietly, deeply afraid because I had not let anyone see that version of me in years, maybe ever. Her name was Mara. She wasn't the kind of woman who walks into a room and makes everyone stop talking. She was the kind of woman who made you forget there was a room. She had this way of listening, not waiting for her turn, not formulating a response, actually listening, where you would say something and then pause, and she would just stay in the pause with you, like the pause was perfectly fine, like silence wasn't something that needed to be fixed. I didn't know how starved I was for that until she gave it to me. We met at a friend's dinner. I was always performing in those days. The charming, self-assured, slightly self-deprecating, successful man who made everything look effortless. I had practiced that character for so long it didn't feel like a character anymore. It felt like skin. But halfway through the evening she asked me one question, one quiet, simple question. She said, what do you actually want your life to feel like? Not what do you want to achieve, not where do you want to be in 5 years. What do you want it to feel like? And I opened my mouth and nothing came out. I had an answer for everything. I had been preparing answers my whole life. But I had no answer for that because I had never asked it, not once, not in 12 years of building and grinding and optimizing and achieving. I had never once stopped to ask what any of it was supposed to feel like from the inside. Here's what I learned about myself in the silence that followed that question. I learned that I had spent my entire adult life trying to make the outside of me so impressive that no one would ever think to look inside. Because inside, I was still the kid whose father left when he was 9 and didn't call on his birthday. Inside, I was still the teenager who learned that love was conditional. That love came when you performed. That love came when you were useful, when you succeeded, when you made people proud. That love left when you failed or needed or asked for too much. I had built an empire on that wound. Every deal I closed was a message to that kid. Every accolade, every feature in a magazine, every LinkedIn post that went viral, every time someone at a conference introduced me with that particular reverence in their voice, it was all a message to that 9-year-old standing at the window waiting for a car that wasn't coming. It was all me saying, see, you didn't need him, you're fine, look how fine you are. But here's the thing about building on a wound. The building never actually covers it. The wound doesn't get smaller because the building gets taller. The wound just gets more foundational. It becomes the very ground you're standing on, and eventually the ground shakes. Mara and I dated for 2 years, and those 2 years were the most confusing and terrifying and quietly beautiful of my life because she refused to let me perform for her. Every time I showed up with my armor on, she would just look at me, not unkindly, not aggressively, just look at me with this patient, clear-eyed look like she could see exactly what I was doing and had decided to wait until I was ready to stop. She didn't try to fix me. That's the part I didn't know how to receive at first. She wasn't trying to save me or change me or complete me. She would just show up, fully, honestly, without agenda, and exist in the same space as me, and somehow that was more destabilizing than anything else anyone had ever done, because it meant there was nowhere to hide. Because presence, real presence, is the only mirror that doesn't lie. I thought I wanted a partner who admired me, who was impressed by me, who saw the empire and said, yes, this is extraordinary. And maybe some part of me still did want that, but what I actually needed, what my life was starving for, was someone who could see the man behind the empire and not leave. She could see him. She stayed for a while. Don't deny it. You've done this too. You've let someone get close and then found a way to make them prove they'd stay. You've tested people, pushed them just far enough to see if they'd come back. You've confused someone's patience with weakness and someone's kindness with naivety. And you've taken a person who offered you something real and held it at arm's length because receiving it would mean admitting you needed it, and need, somewhere along the way, became the most terrifying word in your vocabulary. I was doing it with Mara, and I barely knew I was doing it. I was working 16-hour days during the first year we were together. Not because the business required it, it didn't, not anymore, but because the work was safe. The work gave me something to point to. The work had metrics. The work had outcomes. The work didn't ask me to be vulnerable or present or uncertain. The work didn't require me to sit still, and sitting still had become the most dangerous thing in the world to me. Because when I sat still, really still, the questions came. The ones I'd been outrunning for a decade. Am I actually happy? Is this the life I meant to build, or just the life I built by default while I was trying to prove something? If I took everything away, the title, the money, the reputation, who is left? Is there anyone left? Do I even know him? I proposed to Mara on a Tuesday evening in November. It wasn't the grand gesture. I had planned a grand gesture, actually. I had the whole thing staged. The rooftop, the string quartet, the photographer hidden around the corner. But we were in the kitchen, and she was making tea, and she said something that made me laugh, genuinely laugh, not my performance laugh, not the laugh that says I am a man who laughs, actually laugh, the kind that catches you off guard and comes from somewhere unguarded. And I looked at her standing there in the kitchen light, and I thought, this is it, this is the thing, not the empire, this, I propose right there. No ring yet, just words. Just me on one knee on a kitchen floor saying, I don't want to do any of this without you. She said yes. She was crying, I was crying. It was the most honest moment I could remember, and then I went back to work. Look at me for a second. I need you to understand what I mean when I say I went back to work. I don't just mean I returned to my schedule. I mean I went back to who I was before that kitchen floor. I mean the intimacy of that moment frightened me so thoroughly that within 48 hours I had insulated myself from it with meetings and calls and strategy sessions and deliverables. I mean I had touched something real and run from it with everything I had. Because that's what we do. That's the pattern that nobody talks about in the productivity podcasts and the success seminars and the books about building wealth and winning mornings. Nobody talks about the part where achievement becomes avoidance. Nobody talks about the part where the same engine that drives you to success is also the engine that drives you away from the people you love. Nobody talks about the cost. The wedding was planned for a June Saturday. Mara planned most of it. I showed up for the decisions I was asked to show up for, and I nodded and said, whatever you want, this is your day, which sounds generous, but was actually a form of disappearance. I wasn't there. I was physically present and emotionally absent, which is a thing I had mastered over years and years of practice, and she knew it, and she let it go for months because she loved me and because she was hoping I would find my way back to the kitchen floor. I didn't. The morning she gave back the ring, we were at the venue. Final walkthrough. Everything was in place. The flowers, the seating, the lighting, the music. 2 days before the ceremony, she was standing by the window in the venue, and she turned around and I saw her face, and something in me already knew. The way you know things before you know them, the way the body registers the truth before the mind catches up. She said, I can't do this. I said, what do you mean? She said, I've been waiting for you to come back. I thought once we got through the next thing, the next deal, the next quarter, the next goal, I thought you'd come back. But I don't think you know you've left. And I can't marry someone who isn't there. I didn't argue. That's the thing I keep coming back to. I didn't argue. Because somewhere deeper than my ego, I knew she was right. She wasn't ending us because she didn't love me. She was ending us because she loved me too much to become furniture in my life. Because she had enough respect for herself and enough respect for me, the real me, to refuse to participate in the performance. She left. I stood in that venue alone for a very long time. Here's what I learned in the months that followed. I learned that collapse is not always catastrophe. Sometimes collapse is the most merciful thing that can happen to a structure that was built wrong. Sometimes the ground has to give before you can see what the ground was made of. Sometimes you have to lose the thing you built, the image, the persona, the carefully constructed life, before you can figure out who you actually are without it. I learned this slowly, not in a flash of insight, not in a single moment of clarity on a mountaintop. I learned it the way you learn most true things, incrementally, reluctantly, often on your knees, sometimes literally. I stopped working 16-hour days. Not because someone told me to, not because I read a book about work-life balance. I stopped because I was so hollowed out that the work stopped working as an anesthetic. The noise I had been generating to drown out my own inner life had stopped being loud enough. The silence had won and I had to sit in it. I started therapy. That sentence used to live in the category of things I would never say out loud. I was raised to believe that needing help was weakness, that strong men handled their own minds the way they handled their own problems, privately, efficiently, without drama. My therapist was a quiet man with a yellow legal pad who had a gift for asking questions that I spent a week trying to answer. In our third session, he asked me, "Who were you before you decided you needed to earn your place in the world?" And I cried for the first time in I don't know how long, real crying, the kind that doesn't care what you look like. Tell me something. When did you decide you had to earn it? When did love become a transaction in your mind? When did you start keeping score not against other people but against yourself? When did rest become something you had to justify? When did presence become a luxury you couldn't afford? Because somewhere, in your childhood, in a classroom, at a dinner table, in the way someone looked at you or didn't look at you, you made a decision. A very understandable, very human, very mistaken decision. You decided that who you are is not enough, that you have to add things to yourself to become enough, that the love and safety and belonging you want is only available to the version of you that is winning. That decision is running your life, and it will keep running it until you name it, face it, and make a different choice. I know this because I made that decision at 9 years old in a living room while a suitcase was being carried to a car, and I spent the next 23 years building the most elaborate, impressive, exhausting response to it that I could conceive. And the response didn't answer the question. It never does. I built a new practice in the year after Mara. Not a new business, not a new brand, a practice. A daily, intentional, sometimes excruciating practice of being present, of feeling things instead of moving past them, of asking myself at the end of each day not what I had produced but what I had actually experienced, of calling my mother and listening to her voice instead of half listening while I scanned email, of sitting in a park on a Tuesday afternoon for no reason other than to sit in a park on a Tuesday afternoon, of eating breakfast without looking at a screen. These things sound so small. I know they sound small. The man I was 3 years ago would have heard this and thought, is this what we've come to, sitting in parks? But here is what I understand now that I didn't. Then presence is not small. Presence is the whole thing. Everything else, the money, the reputation, the achievement, the legacy, everything else is hollow without the capacity to actually be here for your own life, to inhabit it, to feel it from the inside. I had been absent from my own life for a decade. I had been watching it from the 31st floor, measuring its dimensions, impressed by its height, and utterly disconnected from the experience of living inside it. I reached out to Mara 8 months after the venue. I didn't reach out to get her back. I want to be honest about that. I reached out because she deserved to hear from a version of me that was finally awake enough to say it, that she was right, that what she did was an act of love, that ending it the way she did was the most honest, courageous, and generous thing anyone had ever done for me, even though it took me months to understand that. We met for coffee. She looked the same. She listened the way she always listened, completely without agenda. I told her what the year had been, not the performance version of the year, the actual version, the therapy, the grief, the way I had dismantled some things I'd been carrying since childhood and found that without them I didn't fall apart. I actually felt lighter. The way I had started to understand the difference between building a life and living one. She listened. And then she said, "I can see you now." 4 words. And they broke me open in the best possible way. Because being seen, actually seen, without the armor, without the performance, without the empire as backdrop, is the thing every human being is starving for, even the ones who have built the tallest walls to keep it out. We didn't get back together. I want to be honest about that too, because this is not that kind of story. This is not a story where the man loses everything, learns his lesson, and gets the woman back as his reward for growth. Real life doesn't work like that, and real growth doesn't come with a prize. Mara had made her peace with her decision, and I had made mine. What we had, and what we will always have, is the truth of those years and the honesty of that last conversation, and the knowledge that something real happened between 2 real people, and that it mattered, and that it changed me. That's enough. It has to be enough. And for the first time in my life, I am genuinely okay with enough, Here's what I learned, the real version, the one I want you to carry with you when you close this video and walk back into your life. I learned that the empire you're building is only meaningful if there is a home inside it. And a home is not a structure. A home is a state of being. It is the capacity to be present, to be honest, to be known, to receive love without immediately trying to earn it. A home is what you come back to when the performance is over. And if you have built only empire, only achievement, only output, only the external architecture of a successful life, and no home, then you will stand at the window of the 31st floor one day with everything you were told to want, and you will feel what I felt, the specific, aching, bewildering emptiness of a man who has arrived and found no one there, not even himself. I learned that the fear of being known is not actually fear of being rejected. It is fear of confirming what you already suspect about yourself, that underneath all the building you are just a person, ordinary and uncertain and sometimes lost, and that ordinariness makes you undeserving of love. That is the lie. That is the wound talking. The truth is that the ordinariness, the uncertainty, the lostness, the humanness, that is precisely what makes you deserving of love. You were never supposed to earn it. You were supposed to receive it. And the moment you learn to receive it is the moment your whole life changes temperature. Don't deny it. You are tired. I can feel it through the screen. The particular tiredness of someone who has been performing for a very long time and cannot remember the last time they put the mask down in a room where they felt safe. You are tired of having it together. You are tired of being the one who holds it together. You are tired of the gap between who you are in public and who you are at 3 in the morning when there is no one watching, and you are just a human being trying to make sense of what your life is actually for. That tiredness is not weakness. That tiredness is your depth trying to surface. That tiredness is the invitation, not to give up, not to collapse into helplessness, but to rebuild, to start again from a different foundation, to ask a different question. Not how do I become more impressive, but how do I become more honest? Not how do I achieve more, but how do I experience more? Not how do I build a life worth showing, but how do I build a life worth living? The bricks are still there. I want you to know that. The drive, the ambition, the capacity for extraordinary work, none of that disappears when you heal. None of that softens into passivity. I still work hard. I still build things. I still care deeply about excellence, but I build differently now. I build from wholeness instead of from wound. I build toward meaning instead of toward proof. And the building is quieter and slower in some ways and far more sustainable, and it feels from the inside like something I actually want to be doing, as opposed to something I am compelled to do by a frightened child who decided at 9 years old that love had to be earned with performance. That child still lives in me. I don't pretend he doesn't, but I don't let him run the company anymore. Look at me for a second. I need you to hear the next part. You are not behind. I know you feel behind. I know you look at where you thought you'd be by now and feel the gap like a verdict. But the timeline you're measuring yourself against was invented by the wound, not by you. The real timeline, the one that matters, is the one that begins the moment you decide to be honest about what you actually want and who you actually are. That timeline starts now. It starts whenever you say yes to it, and it is never too late to say yes to it. I am not the same man who stood at that window waiting to feel something. I am not the same man who went back to work 48 hours after the most honest moment of his life because the honesty frightened him. I am not the same man who built an empire on a wound and mistook the height of it for evidence of his worth. I am a man who goes home now. I am a man who sits still now. I am a man who asks for help now and finds that asking does not make him smaller but larger in the only dimension that matters, which is depth. I am a man who knows that the most important work he will ever do is not in an office but in the ordinary, private, demanding practice of being genuinely, fully, honestly present for his own life. Here's the last thing I want to say, and I want to say it simply because simple is the only language the deepest truths survive in. The collapse was mercy. The emptiness was invitation. The woman who handed back the ring in a venue full of white roses 2 days before a wedding she deserved did me the greatest kindness of my life because she refused to let me sleepwalk into something sacred. She saw that I wasn't there and she loved me enough, loved herself enough to tell the truth. And the truth, when it finally landed, was a door, not a wall. A door. You are standing in front of a door right now. You might not recognize it because it doesn't look like a door. It might look like a setback, like a failure, like a relationship that fell apart or a version of yourself that no longer fits. It might look like the tiredness I was describing, like the emptiness at the window, like the question that has no answer yet, like the part of your life that has gone quiet in a way that frightens you. That is the door. And on the other side of it is not perfection, not a fixed version of you, not the absence of struggle or ambition or pain. On the other side of it is presence. On the other side of it is the life you actually meant to build. The one that feels like something from the inside, the one where the work and the love and the rest and the growth are all happening to a person who is actually there to experience them. Go there. Not tomorrow. Not when the next goal is hit, or the next threshold crossed, or the next version of the plan is complete. Now, in the next conversation you have, in the next moment you are tempted to disappear behind productivity. In the next time someone asks you how you're really doing, actually answer them. In the next time your body needs rest, actually rest. In the next time someone who loves you offers you their presence, actually receive it. This is the work. This is the most important work. And it will not make you less. It will not make you soft or small or unremarkable. It will make you real. And real is the only thing worth being. Real is the only thing that lasts. Real is the only thing that at the end of a life you will wish you had been more of. I know this now. I know it in a way I can't unknow. And I am telling you because someone should have told me and nobody did. Don't look away from this. Don't scroll past it. Don't let this be one more thing that almost reached you. Let it reach you. You already know what I'm talking about. You've known for a while. You've been waiting in your own way for someone to say it plainly, without agenda, without performance, without trying to sell you a course or a system or a 5-step method for becoming your best self. So here it is, plain and honest, and from one human being to another, you are enough. Right now, as you are. You don't have to earn your way into deserving presence, connection, rest, or love. You never did. The project was always a fiction. A very understandable, very human, very exhausting fiction. And you can put it down, not forever, not in every domain, not as an abandonment of your ambition or your standards or your drive, but as the foundation, as the thing that answers the deepest question. You can put down the burden of having to prove it, and then, lighter than you've been in years, you can actually begin. I built an empire and it was hollow. Then I lost almost everything I thought mattered. And in the losing, I found the only thing that ever did. That's the story. That's all of it. That's what I needed you to hear. Now go live yours.